You left my babies to cry like animals." I didn't answer. The baby monitor screen on my lap flickered blue in the dusk, 3 tiny mouths open and wailing in sync. I was sitting on the rickety plastic chair right beside our front door, the one my fiancé's parents kept by the entry like a courtesy for smokers or guests waiting on a ride. My knees were pulled close, one hand clamped around the monitor, the other gripping the edge of the seat hard enough to make my fingers ache. Inside, behind a thin apartment door that never quite sealed, the sound of my triplets rose and fell like an alarm that refused to shut off. I could see them, all 3. 2 months old, and already capable of turning my chest into a clenched fist. The camera angle showed the corner of their crib, their swaddles wrinkled, one tiny sock half off, a little arm jerking up as if even the air was unfair. I hadn't left them. I'd stepped out. It had started the way it always did lately. Small, ordinary, then suddenly too loud. One baby first, a sharp cry that meant hungry or wet or lonely or simply existing. Then the second, catching the first, like a match, taking to dry paper. Then the third, the one who always sounded offended, like the world had personally wronged him. I changed diapers. I warmed bottles. I burped. I swayed until my back burned. I hummed the same broken lullaby through clenched teeth. I even tried walking them around the living room in slow circles like I was orbiting a problem I couldn't solve. Nothing worked. My throat got tight. My skin felt too close. The kind of panic that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Just a woman standing over a crib with a damp shirt, staring too hard, trying to breathe without making it worse. I felt my eyes sting, not from sadness exactly, but from that helpless heat that comes when you realize you're about to cry in front of someone who can't even hold their head up yet. So I did the only thing I could do without falling apart. I put the monitor on the chair by the door, grabbed it again to make sure the audio was on, and stepped outside. Just the threshold, just a breath. I wasn't in the yard. I wasn't down the stairs. I was close enough to hear them with my own ears if the battery died. Close enough that if one of them gagged or choked or went suddenly quiet, I'd already be moving. The cool air hit my face and my lungs did what they'd been refusing to do inside. Expand. I stared at the door like it might swing open on its own. I counted to 10, then 20. I tried to unclench my jaw. That was when I heard the heavy thud of footsteps on the main steps and the familiar jingle of keys. My fiancé came in like a storm that had been saving itself all day. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't glance at the monitor first. He saw me outside, hair pulled back in a messy knot, shirt smeared with spit up, eyes too bright, and something on his face hardened, like he'd finally found proof that I was failing. His voice carried, louder than it needed to be, the kind of volume that wasn't just anger. It was a performance meant to be heard through walls. "What is wrong with you?" he snapped, jerking his chin toward the door. "They're crying." "I can see them," I said, and my voice came out thin, too controlled. I held up the monitor slightly as if it could defend me. "I'm right here." He leaned in, and I caught the smell of cold air on him, the faint metallic scent of outside, and something else. Irritation that had been building long before he saw me. He looked past the monitor like it was a toy. "That doesn't matter," he said. "You don't sit outside while they scream." I swallowed. My lips felt dry. I stepped out for a minute. I was getting overwhelmed. He scoffed like overwhelmed was a luxury word. "So your solution is to abandon them?" The word hit me wrong. Abandon. It landed in the middle of my chest and stayed there, heavy and familiar in a way I hated. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow, because I knew if I started crying now it would turn into a weapon in his hands. "Don't say that," I said. "I didn't abandon anyone. I'm right beside the door." He pointed at the monitor like he wanted to flick it out of my hand. "You're acting like this makes it okay." Inside, one of the babies made a higher sound, a jagged cry that twisted upward and then broke. My body reacted instantly. My shoulders lifted. My feet shifted toward the door. I stood up, but he stepped sideways, not fully blocking me, just enough to make a point. "Move," I said, sharper than I meant. His eyes narrowed. "Don't get an attitude with me." I stared at him. Really stared. The man I was supposed to marry. The man whose last name my babies would carry. His mouth was tight, his posture rigid, and there was something in his expression that felt less like concern and more like judgment. Like he'd already decided what kind of mother I was and was just waiting for me to prove him right. "I'm trying not to have a panic attack," I said, keeping my voice low because I didn't want the neighbors to hear. I didn't want his parents to hear. I didn't want anyone to hear. "I'm with them all day, every day. I needed 60 seconds of air so I didn't lose it." He let out a laugh that wasn't amusement. It was disbelief, sharp and mean. "You're telling me you can't handle your own babies?" My hands trembled once, just once, so small he might not have noticed, but I did. I tightened my grip on the monitor until the plastic creaked faintly. "I can handle them," I said, and the words tasted like bitterness. "I'm handling them. That's what you don't see." His jaw flexed. "My mom is going to lose her mind when she finds out you were out here while they were crying." My stomach dropped. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I knew exactly what came next. Not a conversation, not help, a verdict, a family meeting. His parents' quiet disappointment, served cold with polite smiles. Me sitting on their couch, trying to explain a breath of air like it was a crime. The baby's cries pushed through the door again, relentless, and I could feel my body splitting in two, the part that wanted to run inside and scoop them up, and the part that wanted to sit down on the step and vanish. I stepped toward the door anyway because that's what mothers do, even when their hands are shaking, and as I reached for the knob, I saw his phone already in his palm, screen lit, his thumb hovering over a contact, like this wasn't just an argument. This was him building a case against me. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt louder than any shout. Inside, the apartment was dim in that late afternoon way where the light has already started to thin out, turning everything flat and exposed. The babies were still crying, their faces flushed, mouths trembling with exhaustion more than hunger now. I moved automatically, lift, cradle, sway, my body doing what it had learned to do while my mind stayed stuck outside on the step with his words echoing in my ears. Abandon. I picked up the first baby, pressed his warm cheek to my shoulder, felt the tiny hitch in his breathing. The second followed, then the third, a clumsy rotation I'd perfected through weeks of trial and error. My back protested, my arms burned. I whispered nonsense, the kind of sounds that meant nothing but carried intention. Behind me, my fiancé stood in the doorway. He didn't help. He watched. His silence sat heavy, not the kind that waits, but the kind that judges. I could feel it between my shoulder blades, like a hand hovering just above my skin. "They've been crying," he said finally, as if I hadn't noticed. "I know," I replied. My voice stayed level because I forced it to. "I'm with them." That's not what it looked like. I shifted my weight, adjusting the baby slipping lower against my arm. "You came home in the middle of it." He shook his head, slow, deliberate. "A good mother doesn't leave the room." The word good landed harder than abandon. It wasn't loud, but it cut deeper because it carried comparison, standards, a version of motherhood I apparently didn't qualify for. I didn't answer. I bent to place one baby back in the crib, then another, then the third, each movement careful, measured, like I was handling something fragile that could shatter if I moved too fast. The crying softened but didn't stop. He cleared his throat. "My mom asked how things were going." I froze for half a second, just long enough to feel the chill creep up my spine. I knew that tone. Casual on the surface, loaded underneath. "And?" I asked. "I told her you were struggling." Struggling. Another word that sounded harmless until you heard it out loud in someone else's mouth. I turned slowly, keeping my hands visible, palms open like I was trying to prove I wasn't a threat. Did you tell her I stepped outside for 1 minute so I wouldn't have a panic attack? I asked. He shrugged. I told her you left them crying while you sat outside. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I looked toward the hallway, half expecting his parents to appear there already, their faces tight with concern that would never quite turn into understanding. That's not the same thing, I said. It is to them, he replied. And honestly, it is to me. I leaned against the counter, the cool surface biting through my shirt. My heart thudded too fast, the familiar warning sign that I was slipping toward that edge again. I focused on the hum of the fridge, the faint rattle inside it. Something steady. You weren't here, I said quietly. You didn't see the whole day. His lips pressed together. I work all day. So do I. That did it. His eyes sharpened, offended. Don't compare. The babies cried again, one after the other, like they sensed the shift. I pushed off the counter and moved back toward them because standing still felt dangerous. I'm not saying your job isn't hard, I said. I'm saying this is hard too. He laughed under his breath. People have been raising kids forever. Yes, I said, and people have also needed help forever. He didn't answer that. He pulled his phone out again, scrolling, his thumb moving too easily. I caught a glimpse of his mother's name before he tilted the screen away. She's worried, he said. She thinks maybe you need supervision. The word hit me like a slap. Supervision. Like I was reckless. Like I was a problem to manage. I don't need supervision, I said. My voice shook this time, and I hated that it did. I need support. He finally looked at me fully then, head to toe, like he was evaluating something that had disappointed him. Support doesn't mean leaving your kids alone. I didn't leave them alone, I said, louder now. I was 10 steps away. I could see them. I could hear them. Do you know what happens when someone gets overwhelmed and doesn't step away for a minute? He crossed his arms. Don't exaggerate. That small dismissal stung more than the yelling had earlier. It erased everything I was trying to say without even engaging with it. I felt my hands start to tremble again, and I shoved them into my pockets to hide it. From the hallway came a soft knock. My stomach dropped. He moved faster than I did, opening the door wide like he'd been expecting it. His mother stood there, coat still on, keys in hand, her expression already set in concern. His father lingered a step behind her, quiet, eyes scanning past her shoulder into the apartment. I came as soon as he called, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her gaze went straight to the crib. I could hear them from the hall. I opened my mouth, then closed it. The words tangled up in my throat. They've been fussy, I managed. They're calming down. She didn't look at me when she spoke. Babies don't calm down on their own. Her eyes finally flicked to me then, quick and assessing. I felt 12 years old again, standing in someone else's house, trying not to take up too much space. He said you were outside, she continued. Yes, I said. For a minute. Her lips tightened. You can't just walk away. I didn't walk away, I repeated. I was right outside the door. She glanced at her son. He nodded, reinforcing her concern instead of softening it. This isn't how we do things, she said gently, which somehow made it worse. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you come to us. I swallowed. You weren't here. She sighed, a sound heavy with disappointment. That's why it's important you don't make decisions like this on your own. The room went quiet in that suffocating way where no one is yelling, but everything feels exposed. I looked at my fiancé, searching for something. Understanding, maybe. Defense. Anything. He didn't meet my eyes. I bent over the crib again, adjusting a blanket that didn't need adjusting, just to have something to do with my hands. The camera monitor still sat on the chair by the door, exactly where I'd left it. A silent witness no one seemed interested in. No one asked how long I'd been crying before I stepped outside. No one asked how many hours I'd slept. No one asked how it felt to be alone all day with 3 infants and a body that still didn't feel like mine. His mother's voice softened, but her words didn't. We'll need to talk about some boundaries. Boundaries. The irony almost made me laugh. I straightened slowly, my chest tight, my thoughts racing ahead to conversations I hadn't agreed to, decisions I hadn't made, judgments that were already forming. And as I looked at all of them standing there, so certain, so unified, I realized this wasn't just about 1 minute on a chair outside a door. It was about who they thought I was allowed to be as a mother. I didn't always doubt myself this way. That was the thought that came to me later that night, after his parents left and the apartment settled into a restless quiet. The babies slept in uneven stretches, their breathing out of sync, the room lit by a small lamp that cast a tired yellow circle over the crib. I sat on the edge of the couch, my body folded inward, listening to the hum of the building, the distant traffic, the occasional thud of someone else's door closing. I pressed my palm into the cushion beside me, feeling the fabric give. It reminded me of other places I'd sat before this life, other rooms, other silences. I grew up moving, not the kind of moving where you pack boxes carefully and say goodbye to neighbors, the kind where everything you own fits into 2 trash bags and you don't know where you're sleeping next week. Foster homes, temporary beds, rooms that smelled like other people's detergent, and rules that changed depending on whose house you were in. I learned early how to make myself small. I learned how to watch faces, how to read moods before words were spoken. I learned that asking for too much, food, comfort, rest, made people tired of you. I learned to swallow feelings because they took up space. By the time I was 16, I could sense disappointment before it arrived. It had a weight, a temperature, cold, heavy, like the moment before a door shuts. When I met my fiancé, I thought I'd finally stepped into warmth. His family dinners were loud, too loud at first. People talked over each other, laughed openly, argued without fear. His mother filled plates without asking if you were hungry. His father fixed things around the house like it was nothing, just part of being there. They asked questions, remembered answers. When they said family, it sounded permanent. I didn't know how to belong, but I wanted to learn. When I got pregnant, it wasn't planned. I remember staring at the test in the bathroom, the harsh white light buzzing overhead, my hands shaking so badly I had to set it on the counter. I thought 1 baby, maybe 2 if life really wanted to test me. Triplets wasn't a word I'd ever imagined would be attached to my name. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and paper. I sat on the exam table, the crinkling beneath me loud in the quiet room, and listened as she explained it calmly, like she was talking about weather. 3 heartbeats, 3 lives. I nodded because nodding was easier than screaming. My fiancé squeezed my hand, eyes wide with something between fear and excitement. His parents cried when we told them. Happy tears, shocked tears. They hugged me like I was fragile glass. "You're so strong," his mother said. I believed her then. I transferred my education online. I stayed home. I watched my body change faster than my mind could keep up with. I measured time in appointments, ultrasounds, dollar amounts we didn't quite have. I learned the cost of diapers in bulk, formula, bottles. I learned how quickly savings disappear when you're preparing for 3 of anything. When the babies came, everything hurt. My body didn't bounce back. It cracked and stayed cracked. The hospital room was too bright, the air too cold. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped. I held 1 baby, then another, each one impossibly small and impossibly heavy. The first weeks blurred together, nights without sleep, days without silence. My fiancé went back to work, then to school. He said he had to. Someone had to keep us afloat. I believed that too. The apartment his parents rented for us was the main floor, close to theirs. "So we can help," they said. I nodded, grateful. I didn't realize then how closeness can turn into surveillance. The days were long, endless. Feeding schedules overlapped and collapsed into chaos. 1 baby would finally sleep just as another woke screaming. I timed my showers to their naps, rushing, shampoo still in my hair when cries pierced through the steam. I stopped eating properly. I forgot what quiet felt like. Sometimes, when all three cried at once, my chest tightened so suddenly, I thought something was wrong with my heart. My vision tunneled. My hands shook. I'd stand in the middle of the living room, surrounded by sound, unable to decide which baby needed me most. I never left them. Not really. I was always there, always watching, always listening. But I learned quickly that being present didn't mean being okay. The first time I stepped outside for air, it was instinct, not a decision. The door was right there, the chair, the cool air, my phone in my hand, the monitor glowing softly. I sat, counted breaths, waited for my body to calm down enough to function again. Nothing bad happened, so I did it again. And again. Always close, always watching, always listening. I never told his parents about the panic. I didn't have words for it yet. Panic felt like weakness, and weakness felt dangerous. I smiled. I thanked them for meals. I said I was tired but fine. Fine became my default answer. Looking back now, decades later, I can see how that silence built the story they told themselves about me. The gaps filled with assumption, concern turning into control. Even that night, after the confrontation, after the knock on the door and the quiet judgment, I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself the way I should have. I rocked babies. I nodded. I listened. I went to bed with my clothes still on, my body aching, my mind replaying his words on a loop. Good mother, abandon, supervision. The monitor sat on the nightstand, its blue glow steady. I stared at it, listening to the soft, uneven breaths of my children, and wondered when taking care of myself had started to look like neglect to everyone else. I didn't know then that this wasn't the beginning of my doubt. It was just the first time it had been spoken out loud by the people whose approval I needed most. The change wasn't loud at first. It arrived quietly, disguised as help. His mother started coming over more often, not announced visits, just a knock that was already turning into an open door by the time I answered. She'd glance at the babies, then at me, eyes moving quickly, cataloging details. Bottles on the counter, laundry folded but not put away, my hair tied back in the same knot as yesterday. "I thought I'd check in," she'd say, already setting her purse down. Check in meant standing close enough that I could feel her presence behind me as I fed one baby, her breath warm on my neck. It meant small comments delivered gently, like advice that couldn't be argued with. "He's still crying," she'd murmur, nodding toward the crib even as I rocked him. "You know, when my kids cried like that, I didn't leave the room." "Have you tried holding them more?" I nodded. I always nodded. The apartment began to feel colder, even when the heat was on. The light shifted too. Harsh overhead bulbs switched on instead of the softer lamps I liked. Everything felt exposed, like I was being examined under glass. My fiancé started correcting me in front of them, not loudly, never with anger, just enough to make a point. "She's doing it her way," he'd say, a tight smile on his face. "We've talked about it. Talked about it." As if I'd agreed to something. Once, when I stepped toward the door during a particularly brutal crying spell, he cleared his throat sharply. I froze mid-step. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Outside," I said. My voice barely carried. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You know how that looks." I stood there, my hand still inches from the knob, the cries climbing behind me like pressure building in a sealed room. I let my arm fall back to my side. My chest tightened, the air refusing to move properly. "Good," his mother said from the couch, watching. "You're learning." Learning. The words sat between us, ugly and heavy. Sleep deprivation blurred my edges. Days slipped into each other. Feedings overlapped. My body felt like it belonged to someone else. Sore, unreliable, slow. I stopped trusting my instincts. Every choice felt like a test I was failing in real time. They started offering to take over more. At first it sounded like relief. "We'll handle bedtime tonight," his mother said one evening, already lifting a baby from my arms. "You go rest." I hesitated. "It's fine," she cut in. "You look exhausted." Rest turned into sitting alone in the bedroom, door half closed, listening to unfamiliar rhythms. I could hear her voice through the wall, firm and confident, her movements efficient. The babies quieted faster than they did for me. My stomach twisted, not with relief, but with something sharper. Later, she mentioned it casually. "They settle better when you don't hover." Hover, as if my presence itself was the problem. My fiancé nodded. "They respond to confidence." I pressed my lips together. Confidence. The word felt like an accusation. The comments stacked up slowly like weight added grain by grain until I could barely stand. "You forgot to log the feeding time." "That diaper rash looks worse. You're holding him wrong. You're too tense." They can feel that. One afternoon, I realized the baby monitor had been moved. It sat higher on the shelf, angled differently. I hadn't touched it. When I adjusted it back, his mother's eyes flicked to me. "I moved it earlier," she said lightly, "just so we can see better." "We." The word echoed. I stopped stepping outside, not because I didn't need to, but because every time I thought about it, I could already hear the judgment forming. The chair by the door remained, unused, a quiet reminder of what I wasn't allowed anymore. My panic didn't disappear. It turned inward. There were moments, small, frightening ones, when my hands shook so badly I had to set a baby down and step back, pressing my palms against the counter until the tremor passed. Once, my breath caught and wouldn't release. I stood there, frozen, while the crying continued, my ears ringing. No one noticed, or maybe they did and chose not to. His parents started dropping by together now. Conversations happened around me instead of with me. "We might need a schedule," his father said one evening, looking at his wife, not me. "She needs structure," his mother replied. "We all do." I sat on the edge of the couch, a baby asleep against my chest, and felt myself shrinking. My voice didn't find its way into the discussion. It didn't seem necessary anymore. One night, after they left, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My face looked older than it should have. My eyes were dull. I splashed water on my cheeks, watching it drip into the sink, and for a moment I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I remembered being a child in a foster kitchen once, standing too still, afraid of doing something wrong. The same feeling crept up now. Careful movements, shallow breaths, constant vigilance. The next humiliation came quietly. I was folding laundry when his mother walked in and stopped short. "Oh," she said, lifting a tiny onesie between two fingers. "This is stained." "I'll rewash it," I said. She smiled tightly. "Babies deserve clean things." She placed it back on the pile, but not before glancing at my fiancé, who nodded once, slow and disappointed. Later that week, I overheard her on the phone. "She's trying," she said, her voice low, but not low enough. "But I worry. She doesn't have the instincts. It's probably how she was raised." The word slid under the door and wrapped around my ankles, pulling me down. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell him I'd heard. I carried it like a bruise no one could see. The lowest moment came on a cold morning when one baby wouldn't stop screaming. Nothing worked. I walked, rocked, swayed. My arms ached. My head pounded. I looked at the door. "Just air," my body pleaded. "Just a breath." I reached for the monitor, my fingers brushing its edge, when his mother's voice cut through the room. "Where do you think you're going?" I turned. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "I just need—" My voice cracked. I swallowed. "A minute." She shook her head. "That's not acceptable." My fiancé appeared behind her, silent. Something inside me collapsed then, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet giving way, like a support beam snapping out of sight. I nodded and stepped back from the door. My hands trembled uncontrollably now. I pressed them together, willing them still. My chest burned. The room felt too bright, too exposed. The baby screamed, and for the first time, I felt the urge to run. Not outside, but away from everything. I didn't. I stayed. And in that moment, as I stood trapped between their eyes and my crying child, I realized how completely I had disappeared inside their version of help. The snap didn't come with shouting. It came with paperwork. I was at the kitchen table, the babies finally down after a morning that had wrung me hollow. The light through the window was pale and thin, the kind that didn't warm anything. My coffee sat untouched, a faint ring forming on the wood beneath the mug. My hands were steady now, but only because I was exhausted past panic. His mother placed a manila folder on the table between us. It made a soft sound when it landed, barely audible, but my body reacted as if it had slammed. "We need to talk," she said. My fiancé stood behind her, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. He didn't sit. He didn't look at me. I stared at the folder. It was thick, too thick for something casual. "What's that?" I asked. Her fingers rested on the edge of it, possessive. "Just something we've been putting together." Putting together. She opened it slowly, deliberately, as if she wanted me to see the contents one piece at a time. Printed pages, notes, a highlighted calendar, a list written in her neat handwriting. Concerns. That was the word at the top of the first page. My throat tightened. Concerns about what? She didn't answer right away. She slid the page toward me instead. About patterns, she said finally. About behavior. I scanned the page, my eyes catching phrases before my brain could fully process them. Left babies crying. Steps outside during distress. Appears overwhelmed. Lacks consistent routine. My chest started to buzz. A warning hum. "These are your opinions," I said. "They're observations," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." My fiancé cleared his throat. "Mom's just trying to help." Help. The word felt distorted now, like it had been stretched too thin. "Why are you writing this down?" I asked. She folded her hands. "Because if something happens, it's important to have documentation." The room tilted. "Something happens?" I repeated. She met my eyes then, and there was no warmth in them, only certainty. "We need to think about the baby's safety." The word safety landed like a verdict. I pushed the folder back toward her. My fingers brushed the edge, and I noticed, distantly, that they weren't shaking. "I haven't hurt my children," I said. "No one said you did," she replied quickly, "but you're implying it." She sighed, the sound heavy with practiced concern. "We're saying you might not be able to handle this on your own." I looked at my fiancé. "Is that what you think?" He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. "I think," he said slowly, "that maybe we need extra oversight for a while." Oversight. The word echoed the one he'd used before. Supervision, oversight, control, wrapped in softer language. My heartbeat slowed. Something inside me shifted, not upward into hope, not outward into anger, but inward into focus. The noise in my head dimmed. The panic receded, not because things were okay, but because I suddenly understood what was happening. This wasn't about a chair outside a door. This wasn't about crying babies. This wasn't even about concern. This was about power. "You've been keeping notes," I said quietly. His mother nodded. "Responsible adults do." "And moving the monitor," I added. She blinked. "So we could see better." "And correcting me in front of you," I continued, my voice steady now, "and telling me not to step outside, and taking over bedtime, and talking about me when I'm in the other room." She stiffened. "We're a family." "No," I said. "You're building a record." The silence that followed was sharp, cutting. My fiancé shifted uncomfortably. "You're overreacting." I turned to him fully. "When did this start?" He frowned. "What? When did you decide I wasn't fit?" His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes flicked to his mother. She didn't look back. "That's not fair," he said finally. I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked softly beneath me. My body felt heavy but grounded, like something had finally settled into place. "You called them," I said, "the night you saw me outside." He didn't answer. "You told them I was neglectful," I pressed. "They were worried already," he said. "Because of you." His jaw tightened. "You're twisting this." I exhaled slowly. The sound felt deliberate, controlled. "You're not worried about the babies," I said. "You're worried about control, about doing things your way." His mother's voice sharpened. "Don't accuse us." "I'm not accusing," I replied. "I'm stating what I see." I reached for the folder again, this time pulling it toward me. I flipped through the pages one by one. Dates, times, notes about my movements, my routines, my supposed failures. They had been watching me for weeks. I closed the folder. "Do you plan to use this?" I asked. His mother hesitated. "If we have to." "If you have to what?" She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Something cold and clear spread through my chest. Not fear, recognition. This was how it happened, quietly, respectably, with paperwork and concern and smiles that didn't reach the eyes. This was how someone like me, someone without family, without a safety net, lost credibility one note at a time. I thought of the monitor by the door, the chair, the air I wasn't allowed to take. I stood up. Both of them watched me closely now, like they expected something volatile. Tears, yelling, collapse. I gave them none of it. "I'm going to feed the babies," I said. His mother nodded stiffly. "We'll continue this later." I lifted the first baby from the crib, then the second, then the third. My movements were slow, precise. My heart was calm in a way it hadn't been in months. As I held them, their warmth against me, a single unshakable thought settled in my mind. If they were building a case, then so was I. I didn't tell them what I was doing. That was the first rule I made for myself. I kept moving the same way I always had. Quiet, careful, agreeable on the surface. I fed the babies. I logged times. I nodded when advice was offered. I thanked them for meals. I didn't step outside anymore, even when my chest tightened, even when the walls felt too close. I learned to hold my breath without anyone noticing, but underneath that stillness, something had changed. I started paying attention in a different way. The folder stayed on the kitchen counter for days after that conversation, like a warning I was meant to see. They didn't hide it. They wanted me to know it existed. They wanted it to work on me even when no one was speaking. I waited until the apartment was empty. His parents had gone upstairs. My fiancé was at work. The babies slept, their breaths shallow and uneven. I stood at the counter, staring at the folder, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room. I opened it again, slowly. This time I didn't skim. I read. Dates, times, phrases carefully chosen to sound objective. Nothing outright false, nothing that could be easily dismissed. It was worse than lies. It was framing. Context stripped away. Panic turned into pattern. 1 minute on a chair turned into a habit of neglect. My jaw tightened. I took my phone from my pocket and began taking photos. Every page, every note, the handwriting, the highlighting. I made sure the timestamps were visible. I made sure the calendar entries lined up with days I remembered clearly. Days when I'd been awake for 20 hours straight. Days when no one else had been there. I put the folder back exactly as I found it. From that moment on, I stopped trusting anything that wasn't written down by me. I began keeping my own records quietly, not dramatic, not obsessive, just factual. Feeding times, diaper changes, nap lengths, who was present in the apartment and when, who spoke to me and what they said. I didn't label emotions. I didn't write how it made me feel. I wrote only what happened. It grounded me. I noticed things I'd missed before. How his mother always spoke in absolutes when others were around. How she softened her tone only when it was just us. How my fiancé repeated her phrases word for word without realizing it. One afternoon, while I rocked a baby near the window, his mother stood behind me, watching. "You're calmer lately," she said. I nodded. "I've been trying to follow the routine." She smiled. "See? Structure helps." But her eyes stayed sharp, measuring. That night, when my fiancé came home, he mentioned casually that his parents had talked to someone just to ask questions. "Who?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He shrugged. "A friend of my mom's. She works with families." The word families carried weight now. "What kind of work?" I asked. He hesitated. "Support services, nothing official." Nothing official yet. I wrote it down after he fell asleep. I started saving messages. The ones where he told me to just let Mom handle it. The ones where he said I was too sensitive. The ones where he reminded me that his parents were the reason we have this place. I noticed how often money entered the conversation, always indirectly. Rent, groceries, utilities, help, gratitude, dependence. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a social worker from my past, not from childhood, later, someone who'd helped me navigate paperwork when I aged out of the system. I still had her email, buried deep in an old account I barely used. I stared at the blank message for a long time before typing. I didn't accuse, I didn't dramatize. I asked questions about parental rights, about what constituted neglect, about documentation. Her reply came the next day. It was careful, professional. But it confirmed something important. Stepping outside your front door while monitoring your babies did not meet the threshold they were hinting at. Panic attacks did not disqualify a parent. Being overwhelmed was not abuse. I read the email twice, then a third time. My hands trembled slightly, not with fear this time, but with something steadier. Relief mixed with resolve. I printed it. I didn't show anyone. I started noticing the apartment differently. The camera angles. The way the monitor had been adjusted again, subtly, higher than before. The way conversation stopped when I entered the room. Once I caught his father looking through a notebook on the counter, my notebook. He closed it quickly when he saw me. "What's that?" I asked. He smiled too fast. "Just checking the schedule." I took the notebook from his hands. "Please don't." The room went quiet. "I didn't mean anything by it," he said. "I know," I replied, but I wrote it down. The babies grew, slowly, noticeably. Their cries changed pitch. Their faces filled out. They started recognizing my voice, gripping my fingers with surprising strength. I focused on that, on being present, on staying calm, on not reacting when baited. There were moments, small ones, when I almost slipped, like the morning his mother rearranged the nursery without asking, or the evening my fiancé told me casually that they'd discussed backup plans if I needed a break. Backup plans. I nodded. I smiled faintly. I fed the babies. At night, when everyone slept, I organized. Photos into folders, messages into threads, notes by date. I kept copies in 2 places. One afternoon, as I sat on the floor folding tiny clothes, his mother watched me from the doorway. "You know," she said, "if this is too much, there are options." I didn't look up. "I'm managing," she sighed. "We just want what's best." I met her eyes then, finally. So do I. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. She hadn't expected resistance wrapped in calm. She turned away without another word. That night, my fiancé asked me if I'd consider talking to someone together. "What kind of someone?" I asked. "A professional," he said, "just to make sure everything's okay." "With whom?" I asked. He hesitated. "Someone Mom knows." There it was. "No," I said. He frowned. "Why not?" "Because I'd like to choose," I replied. His expression tightened. "You're being difficult." "No," I said again, quietly. "I'm being careful." The babies stirred in their crib. One let out a soft cry, then settled. My fiancé stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not fragile, not collapsing. Something else. We stood there in the dim light, the air between us heavy with everything unspoken, and as I watched his face shift, confusion edging into frustration, I knew I was getting close to the moment they'd been preparing for. Only now, I was prepared too. I just didn't know yet who would make the first move. The meeting was supposed to be supportive. That was the word my fiancé used as he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the dark interior of the car. We drove in silence, the babies strapped into their seats behind us, their soft breathing filling the space where conversation should have been. The building ahead came into view, low, modern glass, catching the afternoon light in a way that felt too clean for what was about to happen inside. His parents were already there. They stood near the entrance, his mother holding a leather folder close to her chest, his father checking his watch. When they saw us, she smiled, the practiced kind that looked reassuring to anyone who didn't know better. "I'm glad you came," she said. "This will help clear things up." I nodded once. Inside, the room was neutral, beige walls, a round table, 4 chairs, one extra placed slightly apart, a box of tissues centered like a silent expectation. The woman who entered last introduced herself calmly, her voice even, professional. She sat, folded her hands, and looked at each of us in turn. "Thank you for being here," she said. "My role today is to listen and help clarify concerns." Concerns. The word floated in the air, familiar now. His mother wasted no time. She slid her folder onto the table with a quiet confidence that made my stomach tighten. Not with fear, but anticipation. "We're worried about the baby's well-being," she began. "There have been ongoing patterns that suggest—" I reached into my bag. The sound of paper interrupted her mid-sentence. I placed my own stack on the table directly in front of me. Thicker, heavier. I didn't rush. I aligned the edges carefully like I was setting something down that mattered. "I'd like to start," I said. The room stilled. My fiancé turned to me, startled. "We didn't." "I know," I replied. My voice was steady, louder than I expected it to be. "That's why I'm speaking now." The woman at the head of the table looked between us. "Go ahead." I took a breath. One. Just one. "I've been accused of neglect," I said, quietly, repeatedly, without ever being told directly what was being documented or why. His mother shifted in her chair. "That's not—" I held up my hand, not to silence her, but to anchor myself. "I'm not finished." I opened my folder. The first thing I slid forward was a photo. "This is the documentation that was kept about me without my knowledge," I said, "taken from the folder that was left on my counter." The woman leaned forward, scanning the page, her brow furrowed. "These notes," I continued, "were written by someone who does not live with my children full time. They remove context. They imply risk where none exists." I slid another paper forward. "This is my own record," I said. "Feeding times, diaper changes, sleep logs, dates, who was present, everything." My fiancé's mouth opened slightly. He looked from the papers to me, then to his mother. "I didn't know you were doing this," he said. "I didn't want you to," I replied. The woman picked up the pages, comparing handwriting, dates. Silence stretched. Heavy, uncomfortable. His mother cleared her throat. "We were only trying to help." "I know," I said, meeting her eyes. "That's what makes it dangerous." The word landed hard. I continued before anyone could interrupt. "I have a history with the system," I said. "I grew up being watched, assessed, written about. I recognize the signs." The woman's gaze sharpened. "What signs?" I slid another document across. "This email," I said, "is from a licensed social worker. It outlines what constitutes neglect. Stepping outside one's front door while actively monitoring infants does not qualify." The woman read it carefully, then again. "This was done without my consent," I added, "without conversation, without offering support that didn't come with control." My fiancé shifted in his chair. "That's not how it was meant." I looked at him then. really looked. Then why was your mother keeping notes? I asked. Why was the monitor moved without my permission? Why were conversations about my fitness happening without me present? He swallowed. Didn't answer. His mother straightened. We were scared. So was I said. The difference is I didn't try to take power from anyone because of it. The woman set the papers down slowly. I need to be very clear, she said, her tone firm now. What I'm seeing here does not support the implication of neglect. The room seemed to exhale all at once. His mother's face tightened. You're only seeing one side. I'm seeing documentation, the woman replied, and I'm seeing a pattern of boundary overreach. That was the moment the room froze. Boundary overreach. My fiancé stared at the table. His father shifted uncomfortably. The babies stirred behind us, one making a small sound that cut through the tension like a blade. I didn't move to soothe them. Not yet. There's something else, I said. I slid my phone across the table, screen already lit. These are messages, I continued, from my fiancé, telling me to let his mother handle things, reminding me that the apartment is theirs, suggesting oversight. The woman read silently. Her expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. This creates a power imbalance, she said, particularly given your history. His mother's voice sharpened. We provided housing. Yes, the woman replied, and with that comes responsibility not to coerce. My fiancé looked up sharply. Coerce? I met his eyes. You let them build a case against me, I said quietly, and you stood by. The words didn't need volume. They landed anyway. He opened his mouth, closed it. His hands clenched in his lap. The woman turned to me. Do you feel safe in your current environment? The question hung in the air, charged. I thought of the chair by the door. The monitor moved higher, the folder on the counter. No, I said. His mother inhaled sharply. That's unfair. It's honest, I replied. The woman nodded once. Thank you for saying that. She closed her notebook. My recommendation, she said, is that any further involvement be voluntary and supportive, not supervisory. Any documentation should be transparent. And most importantly, this mother's autonomy must be respected. Autonomy. The word felt like oxygen. His mother sat back, stunned. So you're saying we did something wrong? I'm saying harm can occur even when intentions are framed as care, the woman replied. I stood then, slowly, my legs steady beneath me. I'm not asking for permission anymore, I said. I'm setting boundaries. My fiancé looked up at me, eyes wide. What does that mean? It means, I said, no more notes, no more moving things, no more discussions about me without me. His mother shook her head. You can't just... I can, I said. Silence crashed down. The babies cried then, a soft chorus, and this time I moved toward them without hesitation, lifting one, then another, then the third. My body remembered itself. As I held them, I felt the weight of the room shift, not toward comfort, not toward peace, but toward consequence. Behind me, I heard the woman say, "We'll need to discuss next steps." I didn't turn around, because for the first time since this began, I knew exactly what mine were. The chair by the door is still there. That's the first thing I noticed when I came back to the apartment. Alone weeks later, the babies asleep in their car seats as I carried them inside one by one. The plastic had faded slightly, one leg uneven. The same chair everyone decided meant something terrible about me. It hadn't moved. No one had thrown it away. It simply waited, neutral, harmless, like it always had been. The silence inside the apartment felt different now, not heavy, not watched, just quiet. Things didn't explode after that meeting. There were no dramatic apologies, no tearful confessions. The change came in smaller ways, the kind that only matter if you've lived without them. The note stopped. The folder disappeared. The monitor stayed where I put it. His parents didn't come by unannounced anymore. When they did visit, they called first. They asked instead of telling. The conversations became shorter, more careful, like everyone was learning a new language they hadn't wanted to learn before. My fiancé changed too, though not all at once. At first, there was distance, a stiffness between us. He avoided the subject entirely, as if ignoring it could undo what had been said out loud in that room. But slowly, the certainty he'd borrowed from his parents cracked. One night, while we stood at the kitchen sink washing bottles together, he spoke without looking at me. "I didn't realize how far it had gone," he said. I rinsed a bottle, set it on the rack. "You realized enough to stay quiet." He nodded once. "I know." That was it. No defense, no excuses, just that. We started therapy. Not with someone his mother knew, not with anyone connected to anyone else. Someone neutral. Someone who listened. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where the air felt thick again, where old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But this time, I didn't fold into myself. I spoke. I corrected. I walked out once when a line was crossed, and I came back because I chose to. The babies grew faster than I expected. Their cries softened into babble. Their hands reached for my face with purpose now. They learned my voice as safety, not urgency. I learned their rhythms again, without an audience. I stepped outside for air the first time without asking. Just 1 minute, then 2. The sky was pale, the kind of afternoon light that doesn't judge. I sat in the chair, the monitor in my hand, and breathed. Nothing happened. No one appeared. No one took notes. I realized then how much I'd been holding my breath. I don't tell this story because everything ended perfectly. It didn't. Trust takes time to rebuild, and some relationships never return to what they were. But something far more important shifted. I stopped shrinking. I stopped explaining my instincts to people who didn't respect them. I stopped mistaking control for care. I learned that support that costs you, your voice, isn't support at all. The system that once raised me taught me how to survive by staying quiet. Motherhood taught me something different, that my presence, my judgment, my limits matter, especially when they make others uncomfortable. The chair by the door means something new now. It's not a symbol of neglect. It's a reminder that a mother who pauses to breathe is a mother choosing to stay. If my story stayed with you, maybe it's because you've sat in a chair like that too, needing air, needing space, needing someone to believe you without a folder in their hands. You don't have to explain your worth into existence. Sometimes, standing your ground quietly is enough. If you feel like sharing, I'm here to listen.